You're tuned in to RX Radio.
What's happening, guys? Welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio, special one for you today. Today I'm joined by Max Schmarzo. So Max is a strength conditioning coach, works a lot in the concierge space, does a lot with nutrition, has his own supplement company, Upper Echelon Nutrition. We get into the weeds in this episode about sort of the applied science of strength and conditioning. I worked with Max at Stanford University, stayed in touch ever since, lives a very cool life. I think a very sought after lifestyle for strength and conditioning coach, works with pro athletes in a very intimate setting in his home. One of the most interesting, coolest, unimpeachable thinkers I think we have in strength and conditioning. So if you guys don't follow Max, be sure to follow the links in the show notes to get to his pages and keep up with him. Interesting episode across the board. Quick announcement, if you guys haven't heard yet, we're releasing the PSL1 course for sale. It's up at prescript.com/PSL1. So feel free to register for that for January semester. We're 6 weeks into this current semester. So if you guys want to join the next cohort for January, be sure to hop onto that. Skill acquisition as well is going live in a few weeks with Killian Hamilton. That's just revamped into an 8-week course going through the cognitive, associative, and autonomous model of skill acquisition. Killian does a hell of a job in kind of explaining how to utilize this meta theory in training. We actually talk a little bit about skill acquisition today with Max. So hope you guys enjoy. If you guys have any questions or comments, be sure to reach out through the YouTube channel or on Instagram. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the episode. We'll see you guys next week. Yeah, so snowboarding, not really your vocation then, just your aesthetic vocation.
I did live in Portland, Oregon. I grew up there. So it's kind of, I was in the snow. I lived in Denver. I never snowboarded nor skied. But
Can I ask you why you're in Iowa?
Family.
You're a good man. I knew that about you.
Yeah,
the thing is, now this brings up a really interesting thing, because you're like heavy into sports science and strength and conditioning. That's how we met, Stanford University. Shout out Chase Phelps and Corey Schlesinger. What a Mount Rushmore of, speaking of the Dakotas, what a Mount Rushmore of S&C that was.
That was cool. It really was. I remember I actually saw you way back, and you were on the Pally track training someone, talking to Fung, and I was like, who's that muscular doctor over there?
That's those were past lives.
I remember that, though. That was fun. I never mentioned that to you. I knew everyone on the Pally track because I would work out there. I remember seeing you, and Fung was talking to you because I knew Fung, the old bodybuilder. I knew Fung was in the gym, so I knew him pretty well. I was like, I wonder why you know him.
It's a small world, man. Although you're one of the few that is able to traverse the digital space literally unscathed. You are unfuckwithable when it comes to, like, because the easiest way to get a name is like, who's ahead of me? All right, I'm just gonna drag them down and then just enter into like a little tiff with them. But like, you are unimpeachable when it comes to that.
I appreciate it.
Hey, dude, it's because I've been trying to tear you down for years. I'm like, this guy's a step. What can I go after him? Like, this guy's rock solid. Because like,
I appreciate that.
You're low key like the most sleeper jacked strength coach. Where everyone's like, well, you can't fuck with him.
I'll take that right there.
Dude, own it. You earned it. You got the science obviously down. You're fucking giving everyone haircuts. Like, you just fucking blow people's minds every day. And from like an actual practical application and innovation standpoint, you're always seems to be ahead of the game. Like, I remember when you were doing the ground force, the ground contact time stuff, and like just seemingly building this stuff in your garage. And it's like, this guy's fucking, you're like the Tony Stark of S&C.
I will take that compliment. I once did a presentation, and someone called me the Bill Nye of sports science.
Nah, that means you're like, Tony Stark, but a virgin.
I'll take Tony Stark.
Yeah,
my Iron Man suit. I'll be that guy.
I think you earned it.
I appreciate it. It's a fun. Strength and conditioning is weird. There's like a weird level of egotism, and part of it has to do with a lot of people's training beliefs have emotional connections with them. Like, it's part of an identity, and it's somehow, if you offend their training belief, it offends their identity. It's like a personal attack. Honestly, I don't. I don't take things that serious. Like,
What gets me is like one of the ways you ascend in the field is you work with athletes of a higher caliber. And if it's one thing I've noticed in working with athletes of a higher caliber, that it doesn't matter what you do. Like, it honestly, it just doesn't matter. I'm here to listen to DeBaby for an hour and 45 minutes. Like, that's really what my job is, and turn it up when there's like a Meek Mill track or something. Like, that was my job. That's my job. So it's like people who cling to relevance on the backs of athletes they work with, then try and proclaim like what they do matters to people who are the 1% of the 1%. So it's just like, it's a weird inverse relationship, because I always find like there's a couple of like high school strength coaches out there that are like, oh my God, like this guy seems to have a really workable model that not only from a scientific perspective, which is obviously what we want, where we kind of want to start, but from like an application perspective, like, look, he's got 55 kids and 4 squat racks. Like he's out there making it happen, cutting his teeth. So like some of the best application I've seen is in those settings. And some of the worst application I've seen is like endless resources, you know, millions of dollars, amazing athletes. And then it's just like, this guy's going to seminars every weekend trying to learn more. It's like, dude, you're good. The guy over here giving the seminar, probably this jackass here, is just going like, yeah, man, he ran a 4.3. It's like, yeah, I'm sure your go-to method shit really is the reason he went, you know, from a 4.4 to a 4.3.
I think it's an interesting, and yes, I agree, right? A lot of people who are first off in these situations with very minimal resources, you have to be very pragmatic, right? And you have to try and find a way to get your athletes to, even if organizationally, they're like masterminds. I couldn't organize 50 athletes. I have trouble organizing 2. Or even myself in my basement. Like it's a disaster. But I think it comes down to how we think and how we model a world. And so when you think about a situation, and people always say contextualize it, I don't really like that word. I think it's more objectify means and routes to success. And if we do that, we can have a better understanding of statistically like explanation of an outcome and those weighted variables. So an example would be if I have a young athlete, everyone just says, get them stronger, right? And for the most part, the maximal strength variable is a variable that's very heavily weighted in that situation for a young athlete. And so if they get stronger, it's going to trickle onto other, areas. But with a professional athlete, it might be working on their jump shot is the highest level of success for them to be a professional NBA basketball player. And so as a strength coach, I need to understand what weight my specific variables influence on the outcome that is performance or whatever their goal is. And so if someone's trying to lose weight, a high weighted variable would be, caloric restriction, right? Having a caloric deficit. And so it comes down to understanding explained variance amongst the given variables and then the weight of those given variables, and assuming that we have some sort of a normal distribution curve on all those variables, that we can act and hopefully beat the randomization of just picking a random one and focusing on like, okay, the example I used, by the way, was I eat lots of watermelons. And my goal this summer was to try and determine how to pick out the best watermelon.
Oh, you're one of these guys.
I did a lot
of how many times were you in the grocery store doing this?
Let me tell you, I did the research.
Oh,
okay?
for fuck's sake. It's the best science you've ever done, by the way, please.
For those people at home, there is a lot of research that goes into picking watermelons. Now, the size and shape of the sunspot is one thing you want to think about, and the coloration as well. I'll get into each variable in a second. I promise this is actually a cool example. Number 2 is the width of the lines. So the striping you see, the width of those. Number 3 is the shape. An oblong or more oval-like watermelon is actually a female watermelon, and a male is more circular. They have different sweetness profiles. A long one is more watery, and the smaller one's sweeter, technically. And then there's also the webbing on it. So the webbing tells you the pollination. If you've ever seen those lines, that's how many times it was pollinated when it was a watermelon. And what I broke down and figured out was I actually started reviewing all these because I would buy watermelons at a high clip and I would get really mad about having bad watermelons. And so what I found was the 3 main variables that are most important are the sunspot coloration. So you want a darker yellow one, and then you want the certain width of the striping, and then you want the size, which is, I prefer the circular one, and a bonus would be webbing. And so if I had those 3 variables, that is the striping, and I had the size of the sunspot, and then I had the shape, the explained variance of my likeness, the heaviest weight would be applied to the striping. And so I said, look, if I want to make sure I have a good watermelon, I could only focus on one variable. I want to focus on finding the best width of stripes. That way, if I just randomly picked out a watermelon, odds are it would cover the most explained variance for my taste. Odds are for a young high school athlete, maximal strength is going to be the highest explained weighted variance and success. As I get to a higher level athlete, those kind of apply, those weights change, and it might not be max strength anymore. It might be the ability to perform a step back, which is involved maybe some aspect of ankle strength, and that's more of a skill asset that would have explained variance of success. So that might be the first time anyone's ever tied watermelons into sports science, but it's kind of funny that way.
This is why you're unfuckwithable number one. If anyone who's never, which if you've listened to me, I'm sure they follow you. Like I'm just sitting trying to pick up crumbs. But so I think one of the biggest things to like maybe dovetail off that, and poetic by the way, is maybe what are the reference points of variance that we can look at? Because what you seem to have done is basically did a factor analysis on things that don't matter about watermelons, right? Like I think people miss over it. It's like the Lisa Simpson talking about jazz music to Homer. And he's like, you're not listening to the notes he's not playing. And he's like, I can do that from home. But like what you didn't do was list the things that weren't there. Obviously, you just listed like the ovoid versus rounder versus sunspot versus stripe. And you even there did a factor analysis again and was really reduced to like my max strength parallel is the stripes. When all things equal, if I could just go off stripes. For a young athlete, if all things equal, I could just go off strength. I think one of the biggest issues is that we being like the broader community of strength and conditioning don't have a clearly outlined subheading across all of these indices. And then from there have accurate populations of exercises that actually drive towards that. Right. So it's like
for putting that chaotic mess of a description into a very nice, concise. If I could have just
we're yin and yang, man.
I could have thrown that one too. He's looking off the glass oop right there. I'm like Dwayne Wade right there off the glass to you.
I like how you went to. I was actually as you were doing that, I'm like, he's gonna make an alley oop reference, and I wanted to think of what generation of sport. I would have gone like Pippin Kukoc, something like that. Like because you're so obscure, dude. You don't go obscure into the watermelon route and then hit me over the center of the plate with a D Wade reference.
I could have given you a Gary Payton, Sean Kemp. There you go.
There you go. That's exactly what I want from a guy with a mustache like yours. But like, let's try and identify the subheadings of these variants, right? Because I think some people are misappropriating exercises under subheadings and then misappropriating subheadings as, maybe a little bit redundant. Like, a lot of times people talk about strength and size and they're really training for the same muddled adaptation, or they're training for speed and power or speed versus agility. Like what are your big columns first, and then maybe start to subdivide or call out some common misplacements of exercises under those columns?
Yeah, and to give a little more unfortunate confusion to this is those columns differentiate as qualities develop. And the classic example, before I go any further, would be the example of the underpinning of max strength and its significance to an extent to where max strength no longer is becoming significant. And so the way you can look at it really easily is like, look at a really old person who struggles to get up off a chair. Their limiting factor to get up off a chair is maximal strength, because just getting up is difficult. Now, someone who squats 500 pounds, their limiting factor to get off of a chair quickly is no longer maximal strength, but it's the ability to accelerate their mass at a relatively low load compared to their maximal strength. And so if we think about our body weight on a curve of maximal strength to max velocity, for those at home, probably the force velocity curve thingy, your body weight will actually shift closer to velocity related properties as you get stronger, because you're actually, as you get stronger, you move your max strength up, but your body weight relative to your max strength goes down. And so that's why max strength is the underpinning variable at the very base level, because the development of max strength is what allows the manifestation of other qualities. You cannot have velocity related factors be most important. And so that's where it comes down to really understanding the physics of movement. And where we fail miserably at times is understanding the physics. And to give a little side tangent, and we'll go back to your question, I apologize, Jordan, but it's to think about how when you're lifting weights, right, we think about weight dictating force and the force velocity relationship being, if I lift a really heavy weight, that's going to produce the most force at slow velocities. That's true under the variable of weight being the independent variable. It is independent and is causing a specific velocity. But in movement outside of weight being applied to us externally, movement and velocity is related directly to force. Velocity is not this independent variable. Velocity is produced by the application of force. And as you increase your level of ability to produce force and rapidly, the more force you produce, the faster you will begin to move. And so the faster you move, and you want to move faster, now moving already fast, you have to produce more force at even faster velocities. So it's kind of like this circular snowball effect. And so obviously to get the ball rolling would be max strength. And once you get it rolling, now you have acceleration strength. Okay, I got to keep it rolling. And then I have, well, it's moving so fast, it's now max velocity. A great example someone showed was they took a bike tire and they held it upside down, so the wheels are up in the air. And they said to spin it, you got to crank it really hard. But once you spin it, you got to get it going faster, and the taps become quicker and quicker and quicker to continue to accelerate it. In the same way, that's kind of how our strength properties work. Max strength is the initial leverage point from which we build these other qualities. And that is a very reductionist view, not looking into some other dynamics within movement. But those underpinning principles are very important to realize when we talk about, oh, is this exercise or loading pattern most important for this group of athletes or that group of athletes? Because it needs to be contextualized to the underpinning qualities that already exist.
Well, it's funny to make like a real world example of this and talking about the excursion from like rudimentary strength to maybe max strength and initial acceleration towards max velocity in training programs. Like my brain goes immediately to like, okay, powerlifting programming in early stages is usually higher frequency. But as you get better at it, you want to train less because of this, like the collateral that training at heavier weights comes. So a powerlifter might take his last squat, like a world-class powerlifter might take his last squat 3 weeks out from a competition. Where it's like when you look at people then going into their max velocity, it's like, you know, in season, if, and this is just my take on it, I'm interested in yours. Like if we have GPS on a player, let's say NFL, and he's not finding open field and touching anything around 90% max velocity, I'm going to want to stoke that adaptation. I'm going to stoke that max velocity. So I'm going to get him training at max velocity at or closer to submaximal or max velocity, closer to someone than, or more frequently rather than someone that I have in strength. So that's kind of like this snowball effect of like doubling back just so you can push the next iteration of that adaptation in succession higher, further, faster.
So this is where you've opened up the horrible Pandora's box of extrapolation of reductionist science into applied, basically when you apply muscle tendon unit dynamics. And so in a reductionist approach, a lot of these studies were initially applied in concentric only models, typically using an isokinetic device. So for those at home about isokinetic device, think about a leg extension machine, and it has some sort of a motor on it, and it moves the device at a given speed. And all you do is you kind of push and try and catch up with it and apply as much force as you can. And so what that allowed researchers to do was in an isolated fashion, understand the relationship between the amount of force one can apply at the radians or the speed or velocity at which the leg extension machine moves. So from that, you can then apply and pull out, say, look, in a concentric only model, there are these force velocity profiles. So what you would then assume is like, well, if someone's not running fast, they're not contracting fast. Well, unfortunately, the old physics monster comes in. And this is what starts to apply with the muscle tendon dynamics. And so when you look at something like the gastroc or anything that has architectural longer tendons to muscle lengths, the gastroc will actually contract that muscle tendon unit at near isometric speeds during high velocity running. It actually won't contract at high velocity at all. And so it contracts at a very low velocity. What happens is the muscle has to produce a lot of force to resist the vertical stiffness. And when doing so appropriately, the elastic structures will actually allow for the stretching and then recoil. And what happens is the gastroc and soleus are able to contract at near isometric lengths. So they're not really moving and bending very much for those at home. If you think about isometric standing still, they're not lengthening a ton or having to concentrically contract a ton. The reason why that's really beneficial and why that actually happens is because then you can have quick ground contact times. Think about it's like a burst of resistance and it's stopping from lengthening, so the tendon can act as a recoil and let the leg go forward. And so then when we say, oh, if someone's not running fast, do we need to apply max velocity work? Well, what's max velocity? Because max velocity under applied physics is velocity of movement, not velocity of muscular contraction. And the issue we kind of get into is when we apply speed of center of mass, like running, and apply it to muscle actions in the weight room, it opens up a very paradoxical situation where you're like, well, actually, if someone's not running fast, should we lift heavier? Like, because they're not getting max velocity movement, but max velocity movement requires really high force outputs. And I don't even have a perfect answer for that. But when you start to look at the physics of it, it starts to get very confusing. You start to realize that a lot of our textbooks and a lot of our teachings are the over extrapolation of reductionist mechanisms of muscle actions. But then you start reading some of the more dynamic work in regards to how these muscle fascicle lengths actually change over time. It becomes like, well, maybe it's a really high force demand we need to apply to them. A great example is like they did research over at Indiana looking at high jumpers, and they looked at the optimal speed someone can approach with at a high jump before their knee would buckle. Because ideally, the faster they can approach, the faster they can convert. And during that ground contact time, they actually act isometrically as a leverage to convert the horizontal speed into vertical speed. And what they found was the faster you ran, well, the more force you have to produce to counteract that. And the more force you can produce, well, the faster you can run. And so it's like this like circular thing of like, if I want to have this optimal ratio of speed, I need to have an optimal ratio of force to be able to brace against that oncoming speed. And none of those is really fast contraction dynamics. Obviously, when you're in the air and you have a cycle rate and you're, having your hip flexors fire under, I guess, some inertia, but not under any vertical load, I'm sure that's fast contraction. I'm talking about mainly that impact in which is producing propulsive force. Well, that's going to be a point where the high force yield. So again, when we start to extrapolate this, I would love for it to be really simple and be like, oh, there's a force velocity curve. Look at this. And I've done the mistake many times in my career. And it's like, oh, look, you should do this high velocity stuff. And this is slow velocity stuff. And you look at running and you're like, well, everything's a lot of force and really fast. This is really confusing. So whenever I recommend exercises, I always want to say, like, with a little bit of caution, I could be a total idiot and totally wrong on this. And so I guess that's some insights into the confusion I currently face right now that I struggle with from application standpoint.
Well, how often is it necessary to really start to work outside maybe a reversion to the mean? Like, this idea that the simple stuff always works. A lot of times you like go off into the science and you start to cross-reference conflicting or paradoxical principles. You left scratching your head and you end up with something that is very evidence-based that's likely being done down the road by someone else who has no idea that any of these things exist, that might have a railroad spike through his like prefrontal cortex. And you guys are both applying the exact same exercise and just going like, does any of it really matter? Because I think it's a contextual question more so around how is it that you factor in the level of science around optimization with all of these principles to consider based off of the need for skill or output of the position of the athlete, right? Like that's, I think one of the biggest things is like, a football player is 7 different athletes, right? Or 7 different positions.
I'll give you an example of the guys I work with. And it's pretty straightforward, actually, because we just try to work from a success-driven model. We have to define what is success. And on a spectrum, there is no difference between lifting weights and shooting hoops. These are all geared to help you be a successful athlete. And so when you start to look at this as a model of what needs to be successful, it actually begins to start to derive from the skill work. An example would be if I am an athlete and I think my limiting factor would be, let's say, the ability to finish at the rim and the skills associated with it. From a pragmatic standpoint and problem solving, we need to assess, do they A, have the capacity to finish around the rim? And then B, if they do have the physical capacity, what skill work are they lacking? And if the skill work is lacking due to physical inadequacies, then the skill work, the physical development has to precede the skill work. An example would be a little kid shooting hoops, right? You put a little kid on a 10-foot hoop, they're going to shoot with two hands every time. And you could say, oh, shoot with one hand, shoot with one hand. Well, they don't have the physical capacity to actually shoot with one hand. It's too high up. And so we can never teach them proper form if the motor potential to actually express that form is lacking. And so when teaching someone to do a movement, we need to assess this from the standpoint of, is the physical capacity there? If not, how can we potentially assess it, develop it? And then if it is, why is it not being showcased on the court? Are there other physical capacities that might be limiting that expression? And then from there, we start to have a really nice reference point so the athlete doesn't view the weight room as something different from the skills training because they work in unison with each other. But then B, it gives us the best effort or best guess to actually helping their success, right? If we were like the CIA and you have to have like a confidence level behind a statement, I have to try and find the highest confidence level behind a statement that would yield someone success. And so more times than not, it's going to start with the athlete. What do you think? What did the scouts say? What did someone say that you're lacking, that if you had this, you'd be in the league or you'd be playing more or you'd be successful in X, Y, and Z? Then how can I leverage my brain of neurophysiology and all this other fun stuff to help them understand what might be the best tools to acquire that said skill? Whether it's talking with their skills trainer, whether it's talking with whomever it might be in the program, and how can we then direct that towards them improving? And once you start from that model, then you can work backwards. And that is a very contextual model to where you have lots of time to work with an athlete, right? I'm not working with 25 people. I'm working with 2 at a time, and it's a whole day endeavor. And when we do that, that's how we approach it versus, and you can do that because we have the time, because they are athletes who have the time to do so.
Yeah, well,
if that kind of makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the difficulties you run into is the center of your success-driven model might be referencing language that doesn't necessarily Rosetta Stone over to your knowledge of exercise physiology. Like people, like if a scout, for example, like you've had these, like I'm sure you've had these conversations where like he's a little bit slow, or he's a little bit weak, or he's not big enough. It's identifying as like, is that what do we mean the same thing? Like getting on an even playing field of like language, I think is really difficult for people who don't come from an ex-phys background, because it's like, give me an example, right? Like going to a scout and be like, give me an example of a play where we're looking to be like improving, like being very objective in our outcome. Because I think the subjectivity of language where it's like, yeah, he's slow. It's like, oh, is he slow or is he not agile? Like, is it a change of direction thing, or is it an acceleration thing? Because like, I think a lot of times when you just go off someone's word, in that case, you might not know it. You start chasing the wrong reference point in your training options. You start like, oh, they said you were slow. It's like, well, and then you go back on the court and it's like, well, shit, he's still slow. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's like, we worked on the thing that I know to be speed based against your issue with him being slow. And we're like, well, you see here when he like changes direction, it's like, oh, like you were looking for more like agility, and that may have changed your reference point in exercise selection. Like, how much issue do you run in getting clear in the interpretation of what it is defines success for your athlete?
It starts with them, because honestly, you're held accountable to them. And so what do they deem that they're lacking? Obviously, we'll use reference points from certain discussions, but you'd be surprised at some of the verbiage we get back from like different, like you said, like someone, oh, he's agile. Oh, is he really not agile, or is the perception of agility? Like Zach Randolph wasn't fast, but he had a quick first step. Did he have a quick first step, or was he able to get someone off balance with a good shimmy? And so I have film on all these guys. So I'll sit there and I'll watch, like Reed Travis, for example. I'll watch, I don't know, 20 hours of his film. And I have it on every clip, every offensive possession he had overseas. We'll sit and watch. And I go through it all, and we start to look at, what is the perception of movement? Why does this appear to be X, Y, and Z? Oh, look, it's actually how you're loading your ankles, and it's your ability to move your hips in a certain way that is probably what they're deeming as, unable to move fluidly or something of that nature. And so then we'll do our best. Again, there's no perfect answer. I'm not saying I have the secret sauce over here, but it's just trying to be like, okay, from a statement standpoint, if we solve this and this and this, I have a high confidence that we will be in a better position to be more successful than we were otherwise. And that's all I think any athlete or person can try and do. Obviously, if it's a very isolated setting where it's like, I want to jump the highest, like that's a little more objective. Like, are you jumping higher or not? But to say like, I want to be an NBA basketball player, that's a very difficult, thing to quantify. So we just try and do our best to break down a couple of categories of movement. And honestly, there's no way to objectify movement fluidity. So we videotape a lot of it and we watch it. And we have old videos versus current videos and say, do we feel like you're moving better? Are you able to guard someone off a ball screen better? How does that look positionally? And then we say, okay, we think that is improved based on A, the comparison of videos, but B, maybe the stats as well. And then we kind of go from there. But again, it's a very much like a all-encompassing group. And so we were just trying our best to help that athlete be the best they can be. It's not like overly... I can't sit here and say like, I have some secret thing figured out. It's just, I'm trying to solve a problem maybe from a different angle or maybe with a more objective stance. I don't know. It's something of that nature.
Would you rather program because I find mixed martial arts, if there's a purveyor of bad information around strength and conditioning, I feel like a lot of it comes out of the mixed martial arts community because the justifications are so easily made because there's so much interference. There's so much going on. Right. And the idea is like, if you're in a cage fighting for your life, you don't want the idea of doing less and being ill prepared is a very scary, primally driven decision to do as much as you can, which I look at SNC for mixed martial arts or UFC fighting or whatever as like such a nightmare. And a lot, again, the purveyor misinformation, because you can be like, well, they do a lot of this, and next thing you know, they're triangle choking a kettlebell in the gym. You're like, what the fuck is happening here? As opposed to the other end of the spectrum being like, this is Usain Bolt, make him faster. What would you rather?
What would I rather do?
Yeah, would you rather like the nebulous cloud of like, there's a lot going on here, so anything might work, versus there's one thing. There's a 1919 200-meter record. Go.
I think they are the same. And oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. What a stupid statement, Max. But I think they all stem from some sort. It's basically a motor potential to motor skill model. So what is their motor potential? At the most elementary level, their maximal strength, their maximal power, and you can even do like a strength topography. How strong are their biceps, their quads, whatever. Right. And then the skill acquisition model is what skill or asset, maybe asset's not the best word, but skill are they trying to develop, and why are they not acquiring it? And understanding that your central nervous system is always going to pull from its motor potential. And that continuation of pulling from the muscles it uses reinforces those patterns. If I want to acquire a new skill, I have to have the development of not only the new motor potential, because we're doing this on top of quote unquote a bad habit, and then we have to then teach it. An example would be something very simple like this. I have someone who wants to learn to do a drop jump, a very isolated movement. And this is really easy to explain. And someone who performs this drop jump, they continuously load their quads. So they have a long ground contact time and they just don't get off the ground quick. Now, if I were to just continuously do the drop jump, we would just get really strong quads, right? It's going to be forever this cycle of doing this movement. They're going to keep loading their quads. Their body's going to be like, that's how I'm going to solve this problem. Then they just get really strong quads. So I look at that and go, well, if I need to do this right, they haven't been doing it right in the past. So my guess is their ankles and that ankle complex is really weak because they have pushed it up the kinetic chain to a large hip flexion and knee bending. So we're going to strengthen the daylights out of their calves. And if I understand from a physics standpoint, well, if it's the loading that is inhibiting their ability to do this, let's put them on a band-assisted movement. So now we can train the pathway so sub-maximally that they're not trying to be at the nth degree of trying to solve a problem, but they have bandwidth for exploration. Now they're using their ankles, they're popping. Then we go and reassess the movement, and then all of a sudden we are now jumping higher and quicker. I have data on this, and some of the guys I've trained where you'll have them do like a really elementary version of this is like a hop step. So they'll hop and jump as high as they can. And I had guys who jumped 4 inches higher, and then they've also do it in a ground contact time in half the time. Well, how is that possible? Well, it was because if we just trained it in redundancy, they would just kept loading their quads. So I got to pull it out. I got to train the motor potential at the same time, a collinear skill acquisition. So now they're learning to actually do that movement. And then we reintroduced it with sub-maximal thresholds and off a big tall box, a small box, being just quick. And then eventually we have a composite aggregation. So then they get into the sport and they're like, the first time we did a hop, step, dunk, they're like, what was that? Like, what just happened? I'm like, because now you're using it. Like, yes, this is what we want.
Well, it's always so hard to reconcile classic mechanics with biomechanics, which I think was what that example just did, right? Because like we look at sagittal plane diagrams and you can look at moment arms and levers and fulcrums and all this shit, but it doesn't take into consideration that the nervous system doesn't operate in straight lines. That if you have a task, your body is like lightning. It finds the path of least resistance, right? So to be able to Sherlock Holmes it and be like, well, the path of least resistance is dictating a lot at knee extension because we're not getting rigidity in plantar flexion. So let's reduce this down. And like, I like how you reintroduce like the cognitive associative autonomous model through the reduction of load by using like a band assist or something like that. And then all of a sudden through autonomous onto the court, they one hop and fucking posterize someone with their nuts in their face. It's just like, oh, okay. Like it is so simple, but I think what throws people off, like, I don't know about you, when I was in school, biomechanics was taught to me by this guy with like bottle cap glasses, and there was a bunch of two-dimensional pictures. And I was like, okay, but where's the transverse plane and where's time, right? Like where are the other dimensions that exercise programming really exist in? So just like, that was a really interesting, very succinct, no watermelon anecdote to sort of walk through that. Now, where do you think like the difference between like good to great in strength coaching? Because I think like strength coaching is, I don't know, it's personal trainers that like pocket protectors and maybe have an affinity for polos more often, and like the stretchy khaki pants that you can squat in with your New Balance socks or your New Balance pants on. What do you think is the difference between, like, let's say guys at your level versus like a guy in high school? Like, we know a lot of strength coaches listen to the podcast, and it's more like, yeah, that's great, but what is the intangible factor? And maybe it's not even something like being able to know something to this level of depth and detail. Like, what is it for you that started to set you apart? Was it your social media presence? Was it a single athlete? Was it a presentation?
Well, let me just draw that statement of, it's not like I'm at any special level and that someone else isn't. The levels we operate in are highly contextualized. And I think I'm decent at what I do in this context. In a high school setting, I could suck. Like I could be an absolute disaster. I couldn't organize people. I'd probably dance to music too much. I might eat too many gummy bears and, watch TikTok. I'd be horrible. I'd be the worst, high school strength coach of all time. And so again, like we said, the central nervous system, those people that have operated in that setting become very good in that setting. And I don't operate in that setting, and I might be good in my setting, but I also might suck in their setting. So I appreciate the compliment, but I'd be hard pressed to say I'd be at a different level. I'd just say I maybe am a different stream off of a river, maybe just a little aggregation of water puddle, mud puddle.
You're a tributary. You're a tributary. But I think your tributary allows you to have freedom of time and place, which is like, I think, an indicator of success for most people. And it's something that I think you've been able to work towards, whether directly or indirectly, in a way that from like, it is an odd vocation to want to have that freedom. Cause it's like, you're gonna, oh shit, I got to get up at 5 a.m. It's like, yeah, they got class at 8. It's like, fuck. It's like, what did you think of this? Go be a bartender. You don't have to start work till 10 o'clock. Like, what the fuck did you think? Was it always your intent to be doing what you're doing, or is it a byproduct of just how you like to operate?
I'm weird. Like, if you guys listen this far, you probably understand that. Like, you probably got a hunch by now. I know two things are guaranteed in life. One thing, you're born at some point, and one time you die at another point. And in between, we just try living. And so I've really focused on just trying to be happy, and whatever that entails. So I like myself and Reed are starting a new podcast called Players Option, where we're talking about basketball and his hoops journey, because I want to. And that's what I find passionate about. I'm not a person who's very interested in fancy things. I have my car from high school still I drive that has a hole in the bumper that I kicked back on when I was leaving for a finals for Iowa State, and it hasn't moved since. So fingers crossed on that one. It's got like 80,000 million miles on it and still chugging. And I got to the point where I really love my wife and I love her family and my family, and I want to be around them as much as I can. And so I'm going to try and be as productive in the most little amount of time as possible. Because for me, money is a means to get time. And if I can just make enough to have more time, then I'm pretty happy, and I can dedicate myself to my athletes and find joy in doing that, because it becomes this I sucked as an athlete. I didn't suck. I take that back. I'm a hell of a lot better than probably 95% of y'all listening to this. I'll still dunk on your ass, and I'll still outshoot you, okay? So you run your mouth. I got 100 in my wallet to anyone who wants to talk shit. But that's beside the point. The point is, I felt like I was shortchanged. Like, I got hosed. I worked my ass off. People say, oh, I worked really hard. No, you did. I worked really hard. I'll tell you that right now. I worked my ass off in high school and grade school. I had a setup where I would watch TV, and I had a plyo box in my house at 12 years old, and I hooked bands under it, and I would do band-resisted calf raises for hours. I just wanted to be athletic. I just wanted to play Division I hoops, and I never made it, okay? I don't understand how I didn't become athletic. It is preposterous the amount of time I've wasted physically. It is unbelievable that I've spent that much. I could have been Elon Musk with the amount of time that I put towards nothing, essentially. And I got very bitter. It was a dream of mine. I really wanted to play, and I couldn't. And I see other athletes who are in situations that have way more potential than I do. And I would have loved to have been them, but then I'd love to have my big brain on that side. And how can I be the adjunct brain to help them? So when people come and work with me, they come in all damn day. I make them breakfast at 8 a.m. My wife waves them before she leaves to work. I'm making breakfast. I got coffee. We're cooking it. We talk about the day, what we're going to do. We get our first workout in at 9:15. I bring the gummy bears. It's on me. Don't worry about it. We go work out. We take a 20-minute break. We go do our second workout. We take an hour and a half break. You have skills. Hour and a half break. I make your pancakes in between and your meals. We can get meal prep. We have a massage therapist. We have PT. Anyone you need, I get a hold of. We take care of it. We find a way to make this work for you. And then we get your third workout in the day as well. The way I do these workouts, you would think I'm nuts. We work out like 7 times in a day. I've had guys who put on, I don't know, right now, one of the guys I'm working, I'm not going to say it, but he put a lot of benches on his vertical, put it that way. He got very explosive. Got guys who feel in their knees better. We do things without certain constraints that don't need to exist. That is time. Why do we spend an hour and a half in the weight room? Because the NCAA only lets you have an hour and a half in the weight room. Doesn't make any sense why it should be only an hour and a half in the weight room. Why should you work out that whole time? No animal in existence runs around for an hour and a half. You're gonna be eaten at that point, right? You know what I mean? It's crazy. So, moral of the story, I got shortchanged. I didn't like it. It pissed me off. And so now I just want to be happy and help people reach their goals. I don't really give two shits about making whatever and working 9 jobs. I just want to make enough. I live in Iowa. I want to be happy. And I want to have people. I want to go watch someone else dunk on somebody because I couldn't.
That is the most useful I've ever seen a chip on the shoulder. That is the most a chip on the shoulder has ever done to forward someone in the way that they operate in the world. So give me
man. I'll be honest with you. Like, I went through school. I have an athletic training degree. I have a master's in exercise physiology. I have another degree in strength conditioning. I played college hoops. I did all the internships. And I was at Iowa State, and I lived by myself with my cousins. I love my cousins to death. Thank you for taking me in and accepting my $9 a month for rent. I appreciate y'all. But my now wife wasn't there, and I had a card that allowed me to rent out every book in the library I wanted for as much time as I wanted. And I found this like closet of like old sports science books, like Russian textbooks, all these textbooks. And I said, screw it. I checked them all out. I checked out 35 books. The librarian's like, how long? I said, as long as I want. That's what I want. I'm a grad student. Screw you. And so I left, and I had to watch old people work out in the morning for my graduate assistantships. I kept the book next to me, and I would just read them. And I was like, holy shit. These guys are really smart. Not like smart, like, oh, that's a smart guy. No, like there's a Secretary of State and they had a Secretary of Sport. Like it was in like their presidential cabinet. Like they didn't play, hey, Elon, you're now studying sports. Like that's how it would work there. And so like the amount of money and expertise that was developed there, like in Russia, was astounding. It was ridiculous. But they dropped off all this knowledge and the Iron Curtain fell, and it'd be like, as if an alien ship landed in my backyard right now and be like, hey, here you go, bud. Can you recreate one? I'll be like, no. Like, what is this? I would have no idea what to do with it. And so I started reading this stuff, and I was like, man, I went through school for 6.5 years, and I could have just read some library books for whatever. And I would have been a hell of a lot smarter, and I would have helped people out. And it's wild when you start reading about it, because we start to read about it, you understand it's all embedded in adaptive theory, and it's all neuroscience. It's not about how many sets you do on a back squat. All listeners say, can I do 5 sets or 6 sets? I don't give 2 shits. If you do 7 sets, it ain't going to make a damn difference. It's going to be how you load it, how you take it over time, and what actually fits you based on so many things beyond just the exercise, that it's astounding to me. And I just want to get that message out, because maybe there's a couple of kids out there who, that's why I have the educational stuff on EdgeU. A couple of peak coaches out there, whoever it is, reads it, and they might like it too, and they might think it's successful, and they can help a kid become better, because I couldn't be better, so I might as well start helping some people.
You're the Will Hunting of strength and conditioning, but who also has degrees. It's like if Will Hunting also went to MIT while he was solving the chalkboard equations in the hallway as he swept the floors.
If only my chalkboard equations actually mattered. Like they yielded something. He at least was a theoretical physicist. I'm a strength connoisseur. I'm not sure my utility is as high as a theoretical physicist. Maybe it's higher. I don't know. We'll find.
So how much has your approach evolved? Because like we met when we were at Stanford, and we obviously had the limitations and constraints of NCAA, which is like a giant pain in the ass as a strength coach working at that level. How has your approach evolved going into like the fully private sector, and has it evolved since being in the fully private sector? Like, did you used to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch, but then you thought pancakes may have been better between session 1 and session 2?
Well, the pancakes I make are absolute fire. My eggs over easy. You wouldn't even believe my coffee is so lit. I got a little ginger cinnamon.
I got a 4-inch vertical. I'm coming to fucking Iowa, and we're doing 4 months.
You're gonna make me look good. We'll get that to 10 inch, 12 inches, 3x. Let's go.
I'll be able to step up on the curb after that.
No, a lot. Like, in all honesty, and I think it changes every month, every year to an extent. There are certain things that I reflect on and wish I didn't toss aside at times as I changed and grew and learned new things. But the more I've learned, the more I've, especially in the situation I'm in, the more it's merged with the sport as one united field of physical preparedness and less isolation. I've also have a lot more questions and concerns at times where I doubt what I'm doing, and I think about what I'm doing. Not doubt in the sense like I'm not confident in it, but I get worried because I've uncovered so much stuff that has been so much more beneficial that I almost have some weird fear of missing that other opportunity that could have helped someone else. So it's changed a ton. Like, I don't know how else to put it other than the fact that I think from a philosophy standpoint, how I view the world has become much different, which has entrenched me in a new kind of mindset of being much more open. When you first learn stuff, you like big vocabulary, you like big words, and you like things that make you sound smart. Now I just try and actually be smart versus the appearance of smart.
Do you ever think that strength and conditioning can be what it needs to be without having some oversight in the actual skills component? Because that was one thing I liked when you were going through like your day between like the meals and the training, the incorporation of the skills, because the fact that you know basketball, or the fact that you know the sport of basketball, because a lot of times that segregation of, the church and state of the weight room and the court, or the field, or the octagon, or the ring, is really where we lose our greatest benefit, because we don't understand that interference. Like, I've worked with athletes where it was like, hey man, looking at your data, you just ran 7,000. Did you run 7,000 yards at practice yesterday? And they're like, yeah, coach got mad. I was like, all right, well, fuck me then. Go home and eat Max's pancakes, because there's nothing like. Do you ever see a point where, and I've talked to Schles about this, where it's like a strength coach takes a role at the level of administrator, assistant coach, or otherwise, or like a head coach running? Well, I know it's a lot to run, but the interference, and like, I want to talk a little bit about recovery, because someone might listen to this in isolation and go like, 7 sessions a day, that's crazy. How do you recover? Do you ever see a potential for someone, or even yourself, like someone comes to you like, hey, I want you to be the assistant coach of the Detroit Pistons?
It needs to be appraised better as an economical model. I think it fails in terms of economics there, typically due to the short lifespan of a coach. So if a coach isn't allowed to have his portfolio grow in terms of what he's trying to bring in from players to coaches to things that can help him support staff, and his lifeline is going to be 3 years, he's going to just try and tread water and survive as fast as he can versus try and build out the utmost greatest thing ever, right? So the economical model needs to be looked at not only in terms of what could a player yield me now, but what could a player yield me in 5 to 6 years? Could that player yield higher trade equity? So if I get a player and I don't play him, but I spend a year of him not playing, he's going to develop his game, and then he goes out in summer league and scores 40 points a game, is his trade equity higher than it was before? And if so, can my trade equity of my development of my players then be a large enough margin to where I can hire a support staff large enough to facilitate this? And so until it's looked at from a equity standpoint, and every player should want that model, by the way, because that model maximizes every player's monetary gain. So it's not like, oh, those guys don't want to play me. Actually, they want you to be the most valuable player possible. Every coach should want every player to be the most valuable. That's the most valuable 10th man on the bench, because now that guy, when he gets traded, is going to get paid like the most valuable player. So yay for him. But then the coach gets value in return. And so like you water a plant and it grows over time, and my tomato plants now have 5 tomatoes versus no tomatoes because I took the time to grow them, I now have got economic return. And so until that is appraised and assessed in that model and looked at very pragmatically from the top down, then it will never succeed. Because even if you brought in a coach who has high level ability to work with players, and by the way, I don't work directly in the skills asset, I work with their skills coach. I do know the skills basketball very well, so which makes it easier for communication. But until that's the case, nothing's going to come into fruition. And so I think it really falls short in the same way that maybe they also don't have the farm systems, especially in basketball, baseball more so. But they don't have the long lens view at times, and they should, because the player should actually want that too. And I would love if the player took more ownership and there are more resources for the player to actually seek out valuable information to help them as a player grow versus people trying to take money from them. There's a lot of times people want to work with the player because the player's name and so on and so forth. That player should want to work with somebody because they can see their economical value grow. Not because it looks good on social media, not because it looks good on TikTok. Granted, you can stage things for social media and TikTok if that's part of your economic development, but from a basketball standpoint, that's going to be your highest return, or football or baseball. So I'd love to see players have the assets to go out and treat themselves like a small business, because if the team's not going to do it for you, which, you know, that's going to take a very large change because there's so many people on that ship. But if you as a player can take that ownership, then maybe that's something you want to do and seek that out so you can then start to develop your own infrastructure to raise your value as a whole versus like, this is a workout. No, this isn't a workout. This is an investment. This is a debt. If you can play 2 more years in the league, you're getting paid out $9 million if you're playing 2 years in a whatever 4.5 contract. Is this worth $9 extra million for you? Because it sure as hell would be for me. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny that way.
Well, I thought we were going to see that for sure. Like, you know, just the coalescing, the information coming out of LeBron and the money he was spending, like year over year with his like support staff and his strength coach and, you know, his massage therapist and nutritionist and all this shit. And then people started to see it through that lens of an investment while simultaneously COVID hitting. Like, I wonder if at a certain point in pro sports, we don't just see an allocation of budget or a stipend specifically put aside for the complete decentralization of a team strength coach and only having, you know, individual cohorts or teams or collective or concierge groups that these players put together. Like, I know the NHLPA allows for this with their insurance reimbursement, where it's like, yeah, you can like basically refuse service from your chiropractor PT on staff with the team, and your new option gets fully reimbursed by the PA. So it's like, I wonder if at a certain point, you know, the day of the team strength coach might altogether be dead, and the decentralized, you know, we have like almost like a co-working gym space for these cohorts to come in and train their athletes sort of whatever which way they see fit. Because that was something that I thought we were going to see. I know when COVID kind of popped off and team training wasn't a thing, that was when I started to see a lot of guys get more clients, myself included, like in the concierge space. Cause it's like, I don't know, the one guy's not there that he wears a visor and he's got a whistle and he just yells at 55 of us. And it's like, he's not there anymore and we can't go. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to kind of consider the future of it. I think it's going to start to look very differently. I think LeBron is one of few who sees that, because obviously if you're making, what was his contract, 137 million or something like that? Right.
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah, you can pay. And I loved that. Do you remember when he first signed with LA? He did that squat and it was like a very hingy, there were boxes there, but it was like a quarter mile high. And it was like it was also shifting somehow. I didn't even know he had enough depth and hip flexion to have any sort of shift. And everyone's like, what do you think about it? I'm like, I think he just made 137 million and it doesn't matter. He's probably pulling to the left because his wallet's so heavy on the right-hand side. So it's probably what's causing the shift. But I want to switch gears quickly because a lot of people are getting into, because it's increasingly more marketable now, training like an athlete for the general population or the general public, right? Like
Hell
UFC's,
yeah.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a bit, because I think
let's plug my program while I'm at it.
Fuck yeah. Hey, I'm all about the business, homie.
Plug, yeah. Get the get the
paying
horn
the bills. Promo code shallow at checkout, 120% off. He'll
Absolutely not. You can use the promo code AAA20 for Always an Athlete. You get your first week free, by the way, when you do sign up.
Fucking do it right now.
First month,
plug
20% off. Go give it a go. And honestly, that's kind of dope. They give them a free trial. So if you don't like it, I don't care. Yeah, if you don't stay. Like, it doesn't cost any money.
No.
You're like,
no,
should I try it? I'm like, go try it out. If you don't like it, I'm not offended on it. It's okay. It's cool. I hope you like it.
They're going to like it. But because I think there's the lowest yield return in training styles is often the ones that people go to for, they're sold this idea that to improve body composition, it's, a bro split with cardio, calories in, calories out, like maintenance, all this. But I think there's huge upside potential to training. There is huge upside potential for most people's goals. And it just comes down to not understanding those reference points and understanding how to index exercises and stimulus according to those reference points accurately, right? And a lot of people are just like, what do you want? So you want to look better naked. It's like, who does that? Who gets laid a lot? Pro athletes. Pro athletes get laid a lot. You don't believe me? Read anything about Magic Johnson. That'll give you some indication of the lifestyle that these gentlemen are living. But it's like, what are some low-hanging fruit for the general public to start looking into, training like an athlete and reaching sort of like their athletic and maybe aesthetic goals? Because my boy's Jack, by the way.
I'll take it. Why not?
Dude. Shredded.
More shirtless pics coming your way.
Big fan. Double tap.
I gotta go get some tanner. But no, I gotta look good for once.
Do they have that in Iowa?
It's like 78 degrees right now. I'm gonna go lay outside in the sun. I'm gonna go bake for a little bit.
So what are the low-hanging fruit?
Let's go. I'm going off track. First and foremost, more times than not, people play sports still. Like a lot of people do like to play recreationally, and then they get hurt. So I think you should probably think about training like an athlete just so you can enjoy your athleticism without being hurt. It was like I had a buddy who tore his Achilles the first week playing in a pickup league, and it's like, well, you want to play like as much as you like lifting weights, you'd like it to do something for you outside of the weight room. If you like playing sports, it's one good way to do it. So an easy way you can incorporate some stuff. I think there's 3 key areas people miss out on. Number 1, they typically have weak ankles, right? You haven't been running, you haven't been jumping, you haven't been taking impacts, but you've been squatting and lifting a bunch. You got this big old horsepower in your quads and your ass, but your ankles haven't dealt with those landing impacts. So a lot of times people go out there and just want to start sprinting, and they're sprinting faster maybe they've ever sprinted, or faster than they've ever sprinted in the past 5 years, but their ankles haven't dealt with that force. It'd be equivalent to just walking in and only have done calf raises and then go do like a massively heavy back squat. Like, it's not going to be a good outcome. So you need to train your ankles, and whether it's a standing calf, a seated calf is a good place to start. But I think impacts are very important. And so if you think about impacts on a spectrum, you're going to think a very easy way to think about it is relative to your own jumping height and ability. So if I jump 10 inches or 20 inches or 30 inches, I should work on a spectrum of impacts amongst that range. I shouldn't just only do impact from jumping 30 inches on repeat, but maybe I want to do light impacts. And that's called an extensive plyometric, where you're doing something sub-maximal in terms of the output you're putting, but they're still done quickly. So like ankle hops and pops and things that are light. And that ties into the second low-hanging fruit, which is rhythm, right? You want to be rhythmic. A lot of movement is coordination, right? What we talk about and what we see as aesthetically beautiful movements is high level of motor unit synchronization. So there's a reason why touchdowns have good dance moves at the end, and Odell Beckham can dance because he's a better athlete than you, right? You need to be able to move a little bit. So having some rhythm and context with coordination is a nice recipe together. And then lastly, on top of that, is don't be afraid to lift light things fast. Go throw something, go maybe jump on a box every now and then, or speed squat something, because there's a lot of research that shows power development is really important for healthy aging as well. Very beneficial. You could actually argue, and some have made the argument, that's very beneficial for a holistic development of the body, because when you do power movement is a feed forward mechanism. It is not a feedback mechanism. When you jump, it's a big burst of energy, and that requires different brain centers than that of, say, doing a slow controlled deadlift. That's a feedback. You understand where you are in place and so on. Feed forward system is a predictive model, so it actually trains certain areas in the body. So I would say those are three very low hanging fruits that you can get a lot of bang for your buck from. Now, you can also do your arms and your bench press and have a jacked upper body, but I think lower body specifically is something we should really try and train to have some athleticism involved, because that's what you're going to be using more times than not in your sports.
I love the inclusion of rhythmicity, because whenever anyone asks me who my favorite athlete is, I say Sanka from Cool Runnings, because it's feel the rhythm, feel the rhyme, get on up, Lundy. It's bobsled time, but it's so true, because I can always tell a good athlete because what they do in between sets. And I actually noticed it because I figured this was a route we would go down with our conversation today. In some of your recent Instagram posts, you're dancing before and or between or sometimes during while you are lifting. But it's like, I can tell to a certain degree the level of athlete someone's at based off of if they have moves, because it is that idea of synchronicity, like rhythm. And obviously there are sports that athleticism can take on, a higher preeminent factor. There can be guys where it's like, look, if you're not that I don't want to discredit O linemen, because I've seen some of our O linemen have like pulled out into like a Dougie or something. And you're like, oh, okay, I see you. But it's at the same time, it's like their sport skill is much more geared towards strength and power. But rhythmicity, when you start looking at, guys who are, wide receivers, like you mentioned Odell, it's like, yeah, rhythm's going to play a huge factor in that. Now, when it comes to outside of the common convention of like, all right, when we look at the lower body for like the everyday athlete, we look at the sort of the ankle stiffness. We look at the other factors that you mentioned that are maybe like the low-hanging fruit to start to pick off. How is it that you start to attack the conversation around recovery? Because I feel like that's always something, once we start looking at athleticism, almost before we even start talking about training, people are talking about foam rollers and Theraguns and iced foam rollers. But no, there's an iced foam roller that also vibrates. It's like, thank you,
and heats up. It just sprays steam at you.
Yeah, it's the TB13. That's the new one. But it's like, undoubtedly recovery is a huge part of an athlete's ability to perform on the field. But it seems like the most palatable thing for an everyday athlete to get into it for is like, what are all these saunas and baths we have to take? Oh, because I train like an athlete, and it's like they go do some box jumps and some other shit, and then they get in the sauna. Then they go do 2 sets of box jumps. Then they're in the sauna and the steam room. And then they go to just the sauna and the steam room. How is it that you approach recovery and dealing with like programming for or advising people who are maybe more like the everyday athlete?
Yeah, it's a source of needed recovery. Like if people go, I need to recover. And you're like, well, why?
Right.
No one asks like why. And recovery is important, but if it's very mitigatable, then let's do that. Like a lot of times people get tired because they do too much in a row. Like the simplest thing is people just do too much. Like you don't need to do that much. You can take a break in between your sets. You don't need to go 30 seconds in between sets. You can wait 90 seconds. Anybody who's an experienced lifter will tell you, if you do 30-second rest intervals on your squat, you can be done with your workout with 1/10 of the volume because you're gassed. because you just did the squat set with no rest. And so then the question becomes, why is that the case? Well, it's probably a neuroendocrine issue where we're having such large demand for fuel resources and we're probably hyped up in such a massive sympathetic drive and no recovery that we go into such a stress state to the point where we have almost an overshading of fatigue that actually doesn't stem from muscular qualities, but it's probably some other aspect within the neurophysiological system. And so in doing that, you need to be very cognizant of why you're tired. And I think there are three big areas. Number one is people don't rest enough. Well, you can take a break. You're allowed to rest during your workout. Sit down. That's okay. The big thing that makes me laugh all the time is people love to program things in between their things. So we'll do a back squat and then they'll say, oh, well, we'll go do half dead bugs, right? And a strength coach, if they looked at a program and it said back squat, then it said half dead bugs and back squat, they'd probably be fine. But if I inverted that and said, you're going to do back squats during your rest interval of half dead bugs, you'd be like, what? Right? And so just because of where you place it doesn't change the load on the body. And so you can take a break. I think that's number one, is being very cognizant of having an actual break in between. Number two is not getting so hyped up. For some reason, people go to the gym and maybe it's through the public setting, they get very excited and they just get jacked up. And that's okay, but you cannot sustain a highly engaged state for an hour and a half. If you've ever presented in class or taken a final in school, you'll realize it's very tiring to have to be engaged for an hour and a half. You'll be exhausted. So being able to not be super hyped up and being able to lift at a moderate level of engagement in terms of just sheer intensity of your mental is important. And number three is don't be afraid to have peri-workout nutrition, like eating during your workout. A lot of times you can help mitigate certain things, whether it's fuel or even hydration is obviously important, but we eat gummy bears during our workouts. People laugh at me. I bring a 70-calorie pack of organic black forest gummy bears with me to every workout. Why? Because it's tasty, it's easy, it's quick carbs, and we're doing high-intensity stuff. High-intensity stuff demands a lot of anaerobic capacity, and so we're going to need to be able to have some replenishment to hopefully push off, in theory, some of the stress hormones that are released to help mobilize fuel. Specifically, you could argue epinephrine and maybe things like cortisol help mobilize certain glucose from the liver to help maintain blood sugar. Well, if I can have it exogenously, in theory, I could potentially mitigate some of that internal response. And so I guess the fourth one, if people actually want something recovery-wise, and it's not go to bed because that's the big cop-out, and it's not meditation because people like that as well. I honestly think a big form of recovery is just being able to eat food on time. Like a lot, and for athletes specifically, someone had a really good quote for me, and it said, unhealthy people eat too many athletes eat like unhealthy people in terms of them trying to lose weight. And too many unhealthy people eat like athletes like they're trying to gain weight. And so the idea of that was too many athletes are eating only salads and eating 900 calories a day. You're working out 5 times. You're allowed to have some healthy pancakes, or you're allowed to have some eggs, or you're allowed to have some carbs. That's okay. Don't try and burn the candle from both ends. And it's amazing how often people start to feel better and no fatigue, no soreness, no energy when you actually start to space things out. And that's why we do our 3 workouts. It's not like we're doing some insane 3 workouts. One workout might be 8 sets of 1 exercise, and that's it. We're going to be very thoughtful and mindful during that process. And when you're done, you have to eat something. You got to get some water. We're going to take a break, and then you're going to go work out again. And the same idea. We're going to have 25, 40 minutes. 40 is a little long, probably 25 to 30. And we're going to be very focused. And then we're not going to accumulate fatigue, and you're going to take a break. And then you have mandatory Call of Duty at 12:30, where we go play zombies. I have Black Ops 1, the original. We play old zombies on my PS3, and we play that. And then for half an hour, and then we go get, if you want a nap, you can take a nap. We got a spare room. And then we go for your last workout. And so if you have skills, we can do that in between as well. And so it's very organized and meticulous. You need then a soft tissue therapist, because some people really respond well to soft tissue. And that's what you respond well to. I mean, it's very hard to deny the fact massage and touch has some benefit to some aspect neurologically. People have always liked it for the dawn of time. Now let's do that. If you really start to go down the path and you're really tired, I'd rather take an off day before busting out 9 ice baths and sitting in the sauna for 2 hours. Because one off day is okay.
Was there ever a point in your career where you felt like, because I know the thought process that drives the overprescription, right? the idea that this person's paying me and I'm just going to be like, yeah, just go home and then like go to and just like have a meal. And then when you're done that, have another one and I'll see you on Thursday. Everyone's like afraid to do that because they're afraid if they go home, that guy's not coming back. Like he's done. He's now like, what are you? And it is in an athlete's mindset that likely they got to where they're at to some part in spite of what they've done, not because of what they've done, right? So they think that because of what they're doing has brought them to a good place, doing more will bring them to a better place athletically, right? So that's always a tough thing to break. Has there ever been a point where you've had to step in and be like, hey, I want to do ice bath. I want to do, heat. I want to do Normatec boots. I want to do this. Is there ever a point where you're like, no? Or can you find those to work within a model?
Yeah. I'm in a I don't mind the Normatec boots. Someone to put them on and watch TV. I don't give two craps. You know what I mean? But the biggest issue comes from people being too engaged mentally on like, you cannot play basketball, work out for basketball, and go home and watch basketball clips. You cannot stop doing that. Like, get off your phone, stop going home and watching basketball. That's why you play Call of Duty. That's where it stemmed from. Like, it's either that or go to the driving range, and it's too hot out in the summer, so we just play Call of Duty because no more basketball. Take a break. But I'm in a very blessed situation, right? I have an opportunity where I get to work with a select couple individuals where I get to dedicate a lot of my time to. And in doing that, I'm very upfront. Like, if you don't like how I do things, that's okay. You can leave and I'll have no offense. I'm not upset. I want you to be the best you can be. And maybe this environment isn't where you can be the best you can be. And that's okay. I don't have any resentment towards that. And I don't take any offense because, I'm kind of a weird dude and I'm kind of high energy and I play video games and we have fun. And, you'll meet my nephew and you'll go fishing maybe and you get to hang out. But it becomes like a very family atmosphere, but it takes a lot of time commitment. And so if you're not interested in being out in Iowa and doing that, that's okay. Like, I have no hurt feelings at all. I totally get it. But when you come here, we're going to go this route. And if you don't go this route, I will kick you out. If you're late for my breakfast, don't bother showing up. Like, I'm making you breakfast, okay? You're going to show your ass up on time. I'll come pick you up if I have to. I got hotels next door. I have all the, I can get you preferred rates under my name. But, if you're not going to show up on time and you're going to waste my time, please go home. Like, you can keep your money. That's okay. Like, you're just wasting my time. And my time is very valuable. I moved here for that reason. So I'm very stern. And I love the guys I work with. They're unbelievably dedicated. They're very sharp. They're very passionate about what they do. Extremely respectful. I treat them like family. I text my athletes daily. Like, you guys might have seen Reed Travis. I FaceTime Reed as much as I can when he's in Japan. And we'll just shoot the shit because we're friends. And it becomes very much a family atmosphere. We watch your games on TV. I'll buy ESPN Plus so I can watch your games, whatever. My wife will get to know you. She'll, you can come over for dinner and we'll make dinner and we'll hang out. But if you're going to be rude or you're going to not show up on time or you're not going to be open and honest about, hey, I'm aching here or whatever, you're going to put me in a position as well as yourself in a bad position. So please don't come back. And it's just, you can keep your money. It's okay. Like, I'm not upset. It's just how it is.
You got to lay that out for like a fantasy camp thing. Like, you got to be able to, is that an exclusive deal? Like, can I just come sign up and hang out? Like, if I just make up some Lithuanian name and like some .lr email, like, can I just, like, I've got a 7-footer coming in. It's like, wait, this guy with a beard at the door. This is really strange. Like, hello. Is this something that, do you have like a cap right now? Because like, you obviously have your programs that are accessible, but this is your thought process on paper. I think it's good. You have the education stuff. That's like, here's principles way to start looking at maybe taking, autonomy over your own programming. How accessible is this live-in? I'm really interested. You had me at pancakes and gummy bears, if I'm being honest. But like, how many guys do you take in off season? This is really more of like a personal question.
Yeah.
How many do you take in
2 to
on
3.
the off season?
It depends what sport. It depends on their needs. A lot of it, like, I can't have 4 groups of overlapping needs. I'll work out all day. I'll die because I do the workouts with you. Rule number 1 is I do the workouts. Rule number 2 is I have veto power on my Sonos. So you can pick the music, but I can deny it. Okay? We cannot listen to some overly whack stuff. I'm very robust, but sometimes if you put too much of something on, I'll put a nix to it. And I'm going to remove your Sonos powers. So those are the 2 rules. Is I got to do all the workouts because I need to be in the actual workout. Because there's not many people here, and it's a lot more fun to work out with someone. Right? I don't want to. You're not going to go. I'm not going to make you breakfast. I'm going to stand in my basement and tell you to do sets and reps. No, I'm going to compete with you. We're going to battle. And I'll let you know when I win because I'm not going to beat them at anything else. Right? If I beat you on something lifting wise, I got to rack my W's up. And I'll let you know. I'll send you a video of it that night. I didn't know if you noticed. I was recording this and woo, that was pretty easy for me. It's tough for you. But it's only about 2 or 3 people. I'll probably take up to 4, kind of depending on the group and the individuals. If we get 4 people, they will have to buy a new table for me, right? You need to buy me a new table so I can feed you all and maybe some more pans and pots. I'm happy to make breakfast. They'll go to Costco with me and we'll go buy food and all that stuff. But it's very, like, you're here from 8 to 5 and sometimes 8 to 9. You'll sit here and we'll watch Netflix at night and you'll hang out and watch a movie. We got spare rooms if you come in, and the rule is you cannot just come in for like a week and like disappear. That's not how that works. You need to come in for like a couple months because I'm very passionate about what I do. So you come in and you got to be here and we'll work together. But I can't have you come in for like, I'm going to come in for a weekend. I'm like, that's not going to do anyone any good. I'll pay you this. It's not going to do anyone any good. Like, it doesn't matter how much you pay me.
Imagine how confused your fucking neighbors must be. What is going on next door? I don't know. The snowboarder guy has a lot of tall Senegalese friends. I don't know what's happening. I don't understand. Just like, it's like Jurassic Park over there. What's happening?
They, well, I'm good friends with my neighbor. They are my wife's, what's it called? Bride of honor. In our marriage previous, a year ago, whatever it was, pseudo marriage because we got married, yes, but COVID, we didn't get a big ceremony. I say it pseudo because we have a reception, ironically, like a year and a half later. So we're now prepping for wedding part 2, I guess, of the wedding we already had. But point is, they know they'll come over and they'll play wiffle ball. We play wiffle ball in the backyard, and we hang out, and they come over and they're playing with. Rita will come out and we'll play home run derby and get very competitive, or we'll go bowling, or go to the golf course across the street. So again, it's very select. It's very, I'm kind of picky. And I just want every athlete who comes through here to understand that the goal of them is to be successful. The more successful you are, the better I can be. Like, I'm not interested in, well, I'll tell you, I'm interested in me, and everything we do in our workouts is basically about me. But at the end of the day, it's actually about them, because I just give them a hard time when I say that, because it's my house, because they're obviously the star of the show. So
switching gears now, just real quick, I'm interested in like kind of some rapid fire stuff. Give me your Mount Rushmore. Best athletes all time.
Well, I guess best athletes, like just in general, you'd have to say.
Well, because this is why I want to leave it open, because you can always infer what people value in athleticism based off the athletes they choose. Mine are all nuts, right? Because I think the psychological part of sport is the be all end all of sport.
Well, I have some fun ones for you, hopefully. Of
course you do.
I have Bo Jackson from the sheer athleticism
Amazing,
standpoint.
of course.
Right. I have Pistol Pete as probably the most ahead of its time. Right, transcendent. He was light years ahead of anyone else.
For people who don't know Pistol Pete, explain.
Pete Maravich was averaging 50 points a game in college at LSU. He basically invented anything that we see on And One mixtapes back in the early 2000s. Behind the back, between the legs. He had some amazing videos and all that. Died young, unfortunately, but was one of the, go Google his name, Pistol Pete. You thought anyone could pass? He basically invented passing. Like that's what he did. It's amazing. So I think he's the best athlete from ahead of its time. I think durability, and someone I envy would be LeBron. Like, if I could be ageless, that'd be cool too. Like, that'd be pretty neat to be never aging, I guess. And have like 9 different peaks, or one sustained peak is pretty cool. And then Pete Weber for the last video, because when bowling, he has the single greatest highlight of, "Who do you think you are? I am." That's right, I did it. You ever seen that video?
No.
Google Pete. I want you to play Pete Weber. I want you to pull it up. You got to love maybe a phone
Lundy,
or something.
can you pull it up? I got a guy.
Pete Weber. Oh my! I'm not going to ruin it now. I'm going to let you watch it. Pete Weber. Who do you think you are? I am.
No, we're doing this live reaction. This is like Two Girls, One Cup. I'm watching this right now. So what is it?
Just watch. This is for the win.
Do you know him? So he's a bowler? Hold on. Real quick.
He's the bad boy bowling.
There's 5-pin bowling? Is that the small one or the big one? The ball. Okay. All right. Let's watch it right here. We're doing this live. We're probably going to have to take this down so it doesn't get flagged on YouTube. Dude, he's wearing sunglasses inside. Wow. What a selly.
I'm very excited.
Wow. Jeez. That's the most concerning. You know who I'm concerned for? His wife.
So I watched a documentary on it. He's called The Bad Boy of Bowling. And apparently he like someone in the crowd like sneezed and like he was adamant that this guy was talking shit to him. So the whole bowling match, he's like pointing at this guy in the crowd. And the announcers are like, who's he mad at?
And he just like picks an invisible enemy.
So he hit the game-winning strike and he's like, that's right, I did it. I did it. Who do you think you are? I am. Which is the greatest line ever because it makes no sense.
It makes no sense at all. But so neither does throwing a granite ball down a dance floor at 5 pins. Makes about as much sense as that, as far as athletic endeavors go.
Who do you think you are? I am is a motto I try to live by.
That's gonna go on a shirt. That's got to be the next like AAA shirt right there. That's gonna be with the mustache profile with the hair coming out of the bottom of the hat. Sha'Carri Richardson.
Is she the sprinter?
Yeah. She got banned? Yes. No. Thoughts?
No.
You don't think weed was a performance enhancing drug? There's a guy that looks like a snowboarder. I could answer that question.
I mean, how could it made performance dehancing? I guess it could be enhancing. I mean, come on. You let people drink coffee. You let people. It's the stupidest shit ever.
Simone Biles, did the right hero? Yes, no.
I don't know the details of her situation that well. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, and regardless, I feel bad for her that she came to a point where any athlete comes to a point where they have to be on that stage and make that decision. I think regardless of how you feel about the status of it, I think it's tough for her regardless. So I feel unfortunate that she had to deal with that.
Well, it's funny because you alluded a little bit to my last rapid fire question. LeBron James, drugs, yes, no?
No, I don't think so. I think certain people are God gifted. I think my thing with him is his force output is so astoundingly high since high school that I think his rate of decay, even at the normal rate, would still put him at where he is today. Gotcha. He is so physically overpowering. It's impressive. And that's why I wish I do not have that rate of decay. I'm a depreciating asset.
Right. And also I feel the same way. And I'm fanning a very low flame. Where I feel like he was starting here, and even if he does have this going on, he's still starting from way up here. Actually, one more question before I kind of wrap this is with your affiliation with the NCAA. What are your thoughts on the new laws coming in NCAA?
I'm happy you asked me this because people miss the point on this all the time, and it frustrates me. So the whole uproar about this stemmed from the fact that players could make money, right? And so they're like, oh my gosh, players can now make money off their likeness. I'm so concerned. Whatever, cool. Players get paid. Awesome. But what people don't realize, it's actually a play for corporations. Corporations can now make money off players. And I think that discussion point has never been inversely discussed appropriately. And in that, it's actually a power play economically to remove NCAA power as a whole. Right. So if you're now an outside provider that has access, you think about NCAA, all of a sudden liberated access to millions of dollars of advertising potential. Right. All these athletes are in there. They had rights to advertise to an extent without them having signed off likeness. They ended up giving it up, and these corporations got it for free, which makes me wonder why that took place. Why would they not have a buyout? Why would they not have some sort of financial exchange to where they'd allow corporations to maybe license certain groups where NCAA still acts as the middleman and takes a percentage instead of giving up total reign of power, which is very interesting to me. And I think was never discussed appropriately because people are too concerned with kids making more money than old people. And who gives two shits? Guess what? They should make more money than you. It doesn't make any sense. If you can make money, you make money. Go do it. There shouldn't be an age clause, especially when you have the potential to make money, and that potential could fade based on your performance or injury. But my concern, and not concern is, but my interest is why aren't people talking about why corporations are now hawking on this? On the side part of that, I'd love to see a lot of these student athletes treat this more as a means to develop long-term wealth, not in terms of like investment, but actually development of a product versus just taking a cheap, $10,000 exchange. They should go seek out means of actually getting the percent stake in certain equity of stocks, and not stocks, but corporations and companies in exchange, because they are a highly appreciated asset. You make a commercial with whatever as a sophomore in college, and you go win the Heisman 2 years later. Guess who still has that commercial of you as a sophomore in college, right? And so I think they should not be so quick to grab from the honey pot and actually think a little bit longer range on it. And as well as the corporations, I'd be curious as to see how that took place, because and again, no one talks about that. Why? Players are going to make money, man. Oh no, they're going to make more than the ESPN reporters. I'm like, yo, Coca-Cola is about to cash out on this.
Well, what I love is that like the false equivalency that gets applied to like the value of an education, especially now. Like, look, we met at probably, Christian probably got the most valuable education of any NCAA player. A Stanford education is going to carry you pretty damn far if you don't make it in the league. Like, without a doubt, that's valuable. But we're living in a time where, with like the decentralization of education, we're both, benefactors of that, or beneficiaries of that, let's say, that they should be getting paid more because what you're giving them is worth less, right? Google literally goes out now and goes, Ivy, MIT, and Stanford, we don't care. We'll hire anyone because we're just going to teach them internally. Because the first 2 years of their CS degree doesn't matter anyways, and we just need them to fit in and do this one specific job. Because a lot of big tech companies went from very liberal, growth-oriented organizations to more conservative, sustainable organizations because they're so huge and like monolithic now. So all of a sudden, it's like, that's part of it that I never see. It's like, oh yeah, this guy's fucking communications degree is worth, that you could have paid 70 grand for over 3 years, is what he's worth when making revenue. Like, especially when we start talking like University of Michigan, great school, but these fucking guys are doubling the population of Ann Arbor every single time they play a game. You've been to the big house, right? It's like, to say that that's what they're worth of the price of education, to me, was such a slap in the face. It's like, I'm sure they could go to a bank and get a fucking loan for this and then go out and get paid and then make a ton of profit off it. It's just always interesting to see people's rebuttal to this being like the price of the education.
I don't think it devalues education. Like, a lot of the argument was like, oh my gosh, now the NCAA has just showed that education's worth nothing, right? Well, that's not necessarily true, because every other student could have made money themselves. So they themselves could have made money just being a student at the school and doing whatever X, Y, and Z. It's more like these players are now being valued at a higher standard. So the education does have some innate value, because it's not free for students that don't play, right? Whether you're a communications major that's not an athlete, then, you still have to pay the same amount. And that poor person has to pay, not poor as in financially, but poor as in maybe getting a little bit overcharged on some of the education. Sure, you could argue that, but they still pay that amount. And so I don't think it's an argument as to devaluing education. I think it's just very monopolistic clause that existed for some reason, I have no idea why, that hindered kids to actually earn wages. If you're a model, you can still go to school and make money, right? And what's NIL? Name, image, likeness. That sounds like modeling to an extent, right? You know what I mean? They use their name, their image, and their likeness. They're not taking the school and leveraging it. They're leveraging themselves in the same way that we now have social influencers who leverage their name, image, and likeness. So I wouldn't call it a devaluing of school by now opening the doors up. I just think it's finally being fair.
Yeah, my only concern with this coming down the pipe is, how is it that Title IX, was that Title IX? That was an NCAA thing to make sure equal representation of scholarship money went from female to male sports, or male to female sports. I'm pretty sure it's Title IX. Section 9, Title IX? Lundo,
I think it's Title IX.
I think it's Title IX. That's going to be my concern, is like, we see this at top ranks. Like, what is, WNBA versus NBA finals? It's like, well, it does come down to basic numbers. How many eyeballs are you pulling? How much revenue are you generating off of those eyeballs? So that's going to be an interesting thing to play out, obviously, at like, the college level, like a Katie Ledecky, for example, right, at Stanford University. She can pull I would imagine, large sponsorship dollars, but then does that affect her ability then at the Olympic level? Because the Olympic is, the Olympics to me is like the NCAA from a archaic, overreaching, embezzling, exploitative organization. It's the NCAA on fucking steroids, right? There's nothing more exploitative than the Olympics when it comes to monetizing athletes that otherwise, I mean, depending on the country, really can't make enough money off the sport.
I don't know. At the end of the day, like I don't know the Olympic background well enough, and I don't know the Title IX specifications, or nor do I understand how the scholarship are divvied up. But I do think a lot of people could now accumulate power in a way that could perturb certain situations and could be very disruptive in a way that certain people aren't aware of. And I don't think it's individual power. I think it'd be the accumulation of, say, not necessarily an agency, but imagine Coca-Cola just started handing out $2 million to all the best players, right? So they have all their rights. And then Coca-Cola, in part of that clause, advises all the players to go to wherever, leave school, start a school, join a new league. You know what I mean? You can now, you've literally opened the door to them to like leave certain things. It'll be interesting from a standpoint of sheer capitalism, because it's going to really unleash the dogs of money here when it comes to whether it's boosters trying to retain a player, or the player's value, or if a player starts a company and they do seed funding for a company that does, you know what I mean? You could do so many workarounds to have, whether it's some weird form of investment, you could have these conglomerations form, and these players could get not only lots of power, but the people who have taken them on essentially have power over them, as agencies would if they were actors or something of that nature.
I would love Coca-Cola to start a basketball team and then make you the strength coach. You'd be the first. It'd be the NIL fucking Coca-Cola S&C and assistant coach. It'd be amazing.
Well, I'm curious about AAU teams. That's the biggest one I'm curious about, because Nike could just unleash the hounds, and they could buy out every AAU team and buy out every player. You could buy every single high school player.
But is it that far off? I mean, with the naming rights around stadiums, that's what's next up, is just the naming rights around the team. Like, what is the location? The San Francisco 49ers are in Santa Clara. The Giants are in New Jersey. Like, we're not even in the same state anymore. And we're still calling. So it's like, does it matter if it's the New York Giants, if it's in fucking Hoboken? Like, does it matter if it's the Coca-Cola Giants? Does it matter?
That's what people said about like the SEC forming, like this massive conference, and the Big 12 essentially dissolving and going to the Big 10, and the Pac-12 potentially accumulating teams. I've heard someone talk about how it could be a potential power grab to overstep the NCAA, because you could have three conferences that hold all 70 major teams, and they could unify and form their own conference in isolation of it, and they'd have the revenue stream to do it because they hold all the TV rights.
You know what? If it means, I think ultimately, the free market economy will sort out, and the cream will rise to the top. Because just to kind of bring it back to our field, how hamstrung we both were in the collegiate setting by these seemingly arbitrary restrictions on athletes and training. Like, I think this could open up the doors to really unlock the potential of like young athletes and then ultimately professional athletes. Like, I think, the records we're seeing in whether it's track and field, whether it's long jump, high jump, points per season, average points per game, home runs, touchdowns, running yards, throwing, receiving, whatever. I think in the next 10 years, free market will be the reason why all of these records fall, because you're going to see a better nurtured environment. Like, FC Barcelona is going to start scouting kids when they're 10 because it's a business and it's run like, so you go to FC Barcelona school and you don't have calculus, you have passing class or some bullshit, right? So I'm excited for that, if for no other reason. Pay the kids for sure. But at the end of the day, like, back to our vocation, I think we're going to see some really cool opportunities to start to help athletes and athletics in general.
I'm just hoping for eligibility to be extended to infinite so I can make a comeback. I'm gonna make my comeback in Division III hoops if they extend eligibility for eternity, and I'm gonna make a YouTube page about it, on Instagram, trials and tribulations of a 95-year-old D3 athlete.
I just want a jersey. That's all I want.
I should, man. I should take advantage of this NIL deal when I get back and they extend eligibility. I'll be 35. There'll be limitless eligibility.
Yeah. Well, you could probably apply as a mature student. You probably get a discount rate on like your tuition if you're just a walk on. It's like 32 Jump Street over here.
That'd be so great. I already burned my eligibility, but they extend it. I'll take it back. I'll go back and play a year. People watch out.
I think if you shave the mustache, you could pull it off.
People want though.
Yeah.
I look like a movie. I look like a movie star.
You do. If that movie is about a guy who picks up hitchhikers and kills them.
Oh no.
Dude, you live in Iowa and you look like that. If you walk into a bank, I'm hitting the button under the counter. Are you joking me? Come on.
Is that the button to warn the paparazzi that a local celebrity's here? So who's this male model that's walked in? Warn the paparazzi, get some photos.
Oh God.
That's what I get a lot of messages on Instagram. Do you still model? I said still. Currently am.
Currently. Wow. All right. On that note, he's clearly lost it. His blood sugar is low. Time to get some gummy bears into him. Max, I appreciate you taking the time, man. This is long overdue. This is version 1 of we're just going to do an ongoing segment. This will be like Strength Coach's Corner with Max Schmarzo.
So I'll be on here. Pretty soon we're going to have some fight debates.
Let's do it.
I'm excited to get on the undercard. We'll be bowling on the undercard.
Yes. Who can get the better soundbite post-strike? The bar has been set. Yes,
I'm very excited to help. Give away free courses for you. Promote with a discount. Is there a discount code out there? Is it Schmarzo 20?
Schmarzo 100. It's Schmarzo 100. 100.
For 100% off all future educational material, George.
Everything with my name on. Yeah.
You just have to present my NFT.
You got a kickback. You got a kickback for it. Dude, it's been cool to catch up. I'm stoked to see, from you and Chase working in the lab so many years ago to you living in Iowa, making pancakes and making the world a better place to train, dude. I'm pumped that you're doing your thing in a way that only you could do, man. I'm happy for you.
You know what, everyone? Thanks for listening. I appreciate you, Jordan, having me on here. I always want to say thank you to anyone letting me come on and rant for an extended period of time.
Dude, you have a seat right there. I don't know if you can see that in the frame or not, but there's a chair next to me that's yours. If you're in town or you have a giant screen in front of my face, if you ever want to come back on, that just.
And where are you?
Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll fit right in with the muzzy.
Are we excited? Tomorrow, Certified Lover Boy? Finally?
Big Drake, it's dropping. He's the sixth god.
I am a massive Drake fan.
I'm more excited about your pre-workout dance moves to the new jams.
I have announced that if Drake would want to come for a month here to work out in secrecy to help him dunk in his game.
I know his bodyguard.
God, you got my number.
I'll see if I can.
I know that's that tatted dude who's jacked.
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Well, he's posted him.
I know, it's terrifying. He needs all the
help. He has a fitness page.
That would be like the one. That would be your toughest client yet.
I just want to be mentioned in a rap line about making pancakes of something, and that's all I'm asking for. It's not a big request. I'd take some Certified Lover Boy beanie and a sweatshirt and one line, even if it's small. I'll take it.
Schmarzo pancakes. I'm sure if anyone could fit it into a fire bar, it would be.
It probably would be.
Yeah.
Do I ever come up in discussion over low-fat muffins and double pump lattes and low-fat muffins? It'd be like low-fat pancakes or something. I'm waiting for it, Drake. You can do it. I have faith in you.
We'll put the word out. I'll try and get this in his ear.
I'm putting it out right now. I figured millions and millions of people listening to this, and someone probably knows.
It'll be my mom, essentially, listening to this, I'm sure. And Lundy's here.
Well, maybe if any of them knows.
We'll see what we can do.
Okay, I appreciate it.
All right, man.
I'll get OVO Max.
Real quick, Instagram handle, website, all that stuff. Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can check me out at strong_by_science. And I suggest you check out my Always an Athlete. I actually have an Instagram page for that too. It's Always an Athlete. Plug, plug, plug. And if you like me and you like learning from me, you can check out The Edge U. That's Paul Fabricks and myself have put that website together where I share my detailed educational material in a little more organized fashion than what this madness was today. And it's designed to help people think differently about the training processes and all the science. We break down some fun things there. I have Upper Echelon Nutrition. So that is our supplement company. And that is, we have protein, we have collagen and creatine right now, some other fun stuff and exciting stuff on the way. And so we're very excited about that. And so if you want to check that out, you can use Strong by Science to get 20% off your first purchase. I do believe that's the right code. I hope I'm not wrong. And then I do have, whatever else you can find me on, Strong by Science. Max Schmarzo is my name. So if you Google that, there's no one else. Yes.
The only
I
one.
like that.
The one and only.
I like that big mood.
Yeah,
That
that's
energy.
you, man. That's you.
Absolutely.
And all day, every which way, twice on Sundays. Max, appreciate your time, man.
I appreciate everyone there.